The hotel maid's scream echoed down the 8th floor corridor of the Oceanside Resort at 10:15 a.m. on March 23, 2002. Maria Santos had just used her master key to enter room 814 for routine cleaning, expecting to find another hungover college student sleeping off the previous night's spring break festivities. Instead, she found a perfectly made bed that hadn't been slept in, personal belongings arranged with suspicious precision, and a bathroom where wet towels suggested recent use. But the guest herself, 22-year-old Amanda Cole from Ohio State University, was nowhere to be found. Most disturbing was the chain lock, still engaged from the inside, mocking every logical explanation for how someone could exit a room that remained sealed. The Oceanside Resort stood as a fading monument to Daytona Beach's glory days as America's premier spring break destination. Built in 1978, the 11-story concrete tower had hosted generations of college students seeking sun, surf, and the kind of controlled chaos that characterized March on Florida's Atlantic coast. By 2002, the property was showing its age. Worn carpets, outdated fixtures, and the persistent smell of chlorine from the pool that permeated the lower floors. But location mattered more than luxury during spring break season. The Oceanside sat directly on the beach, offering rooms with ocean views and easy access to the strip of bars, restaurants, and souvenir shops that catered to the annual invasion of students from universities across the eastern United States. During the 2 weeks surrounding spring equinox, the hotel operated at maximum capacity. Every room filled with groups of students who treated the aging property as temporary headquarters for their week of freedom from academic responsibilities. Amanda Cole had checked into room 814 on March 19, 2002, part of a group of 6 Ohio State students who had reserved 3 adjoining rooms for their spring break trip. Unlike many of her peers, Amanda wasn't in Florida primarily for parties and beach time. The criminology major had brought textbooks and planned to balance leisure with serious studying. Midterm examinations awaited her return to Columbus, and maintaining her 3.8 GPA required discipline even during vacation weeks. Her friends had teased her about the study materials, but they'd also grown accustomed to Amanda's responsible nature. She was the designated driver, the one who made sure everyone had their room keys before leaving for the evening, the friend who kept track of group expenses and ensured nobody got separated in crowded venues. Her classmates studying criminal justice found it ironic that someone so cautious, so aware of safety protocols and risk assessment, would become the victim of a crime that would baffle investigators for over 2 decades. The morning of March 23rd had begun routinely for the Oceanside Resort housekeeping staff. Maria Santos, a 38-year-old single mother who had worked at the hotel for 12 years, started her shift at 7 a.m. with her usual assignment of cleaning rooms on the 8th and 9th floors. She followed the same pattern every day, checking her cart to ensure adequate supplies of towels, toiletries, and cleaning products before beginning her systematic progression through occupied rooms. The 8th floor during spring break presented unique challenges. Students often left rooms in chaotic conditions: empty beer bottles, scattered clothing, bathroom floors soaked from shower water tracked throughout. Maria had learned to work efficiently, maintaining the professional standards the hotel required while moving quickly enough to complete her assigned rooms within her shift. She'd seen it all during spring break seasons: passed-out students who barely stirred during cleaning, rooms that appeared to have hosted amateur wrestling matches, bathrooms that required industrial-strength cleaning products. But room 814 was different in ways that immediately registered as wrong. Maria knocked 3 times, announcing housekeeping in the accented English she'd practiced during her years working at the hotel. No response came from within. She waited the required 30 seconds before using her master key, following procedures designed to prevent embarrassing encounters with guests who might be sleeping or otherwise indisposed. The door opened only 4 inches before catching on the chain lock, which remained engaged from inside the room. This occasionally happened when guests left without properly securing their rooms, or when security personnel had chain-locked rooms for various reasons. But protocol required that Maria report chain-locked rooms to her supervisor, rather than simply moving to the next assignment. The engaged chain might indicate a guest who was still inside and didn't want to be disturbed. Maria called her supervisor, Carlos Mendez, who arrived within 5 minutes. Carlos had worked hotel security before transferring to housekeeping management, and he understood the protocols for dealing with potentially occupied rooms. He knocked firmly, announcing himself loudly enough that anyone inside should hear clearly. Silence. Carlos used his own master key, confirming that the chain lock prevented the door from opening more than a few inches. Through the gap, he could see the bed, made with military precision, the kind of neat arrangement that suggested it hadn't been slept in overnight. He could see the desk, where a cell phone sat charging beside neatly stacked textbooks. He could see the nightstand, where a purse rested alongside a pair of sunglasses. What he couldn't see was any indication of human presence. "Miss Cole, this is hotel management. We need to perform a safety check. Please respond if you can hear me." Nothing. The decision to cut the chain lock wasn't made lightly. Hotel policy required guest privacy be respected except in emergency situations where safety concerns overrode normal protocols. But an engaged chain lock with no response to calls raised immediate concerns about a guest who might be incapacitated or injured. Carlos called Hotel Security Chief Raymond Tucker, explaining the situation and requesting authorization to enter the room. Tucker arrived at 10:12 a.m. with bolt cutters designed for exactly this purpose. Within 30 seconds, he'd cut through the chain lock and pushed the door fully open, revealing a scene that made no sense whatsoever. Room 814 appeared to be staged rather than occupied. The bed was made with perfect hospital corners, the kind of precision that housekeeping staff achieved but that college students typically didn't bother with. Amanda's suitcase sat closed on the luggage rack, her clothing neatly folded inside. Her textbooks were stacked on the desk in order of size, bookmarks indicating her progress through assigned readings. Her toiletries in the bathroom were arranged with geometric precision, toothbrush aligned parallel to the sink edge, makeup organized by type and color. But signs of recent use complicated the picture of abandonment. Damp towels hung on the bathroom rack, suggesting someone had showered within the past few hours. The coffee maker on the counter held recently brewed coffee, the carafe still slightly warm to the touch. Most significantly, water droplets on the shower walls indicated usage within the past several hours. Overnight evaporation would have eliminated such traces. Amanda Cole's cell phone, wallet, and room key lay on the desk as if she'd carefully arranged them before stepping out briefly. Her driver's license showed her smiling face beside her vital statistics. Amanda Nicole Cole, DOB 08-15-1979, height 5'6", weight 125 lbs, brown hair, blue eyes. The photo had been taken 2 years earlier, but friends would later confirm it remained an accurate representation of her appearance. The room's chain lock, now severed but still attached to the doorframe, represented the central mystery that would confound investigators for 22 years. Hotel policy required that chain locks could only be engaged from inside the room. The mechanism's design prevented external manipulation. Yet the room showed no signs of forced exit through windows, which didn't open more than 4 inches for safety reasons on upper floors, or alternative access points that might explain how someone could leave while the chain remained secured. Raymond Tucker had worked hotel security for 18 years across multiple properties, dealing with everything from theft to assault to occasional deaths from natural causes or substance abuse, but he'd never encountered anything like Room 814. His immediate instinct was to preserve the scene and contact law enforcement, understanding that whatever had happened to Amanda Cole, the circumstances suggested something far more serious than a college student who'd simply wandered off. At 10:27 a.m., Daytona Beach police received the call that would initiate one of the most perplexing missing person investigations in Florida history. The responding officer, Sergeant Michael Peterson, arrived at 10:43 a.m. with his partner, Officer Lisa Chen. Both veterans had worked spring break patrols for years, dealing with the routine chaos that came with thousands of college students descending on the beach for 2 weeks of drinking, partying, and occasional law-breaking. But the scene in Room 814 didn't fit any pattern they'd encountered before. Missing spring breakers typically left trails, friends who'd seen them leave with someone, security footage showing their departures, evidence of struggles if foul play was involved. Room 814 offered none of these elements. It was as if Amanda Cole had carefully arranged her belongings, showered, made her bed with meticulous precision, and then dematerialized, while somehow leaving the chain lock engaged from a room she no longer occupied. How does someone disappear from a locked hotel room on the 8th floor? That question, whispered initially by confused hotel staff and later by frustrated investigators, would haunt Daytona Beach for over 2 decades. But the answer, when it finally emerged during hotel renovations in 2024, would reveal something more disturbing than anyone had imagined. The most dangerous predators aren't the strangers parents warn their children about. They're the people with master keys, construction knowledge, and the patience to wait 22 years for their crimes to be discovered. 18. Crow. Evening start. Amanda Cole's final evening began innocuously enough. At 6 p.m. on March 22nd, she and her 5 Ohio State classmates gathered in room 812, the room shared by her friends Jessica Martinez and Sarah Thompson, to plan their evening activities. The group had fallen into a comfortable rhythm over their first 3 days in Daytona Beach, balancing time at the beach with exploration of local restaurants and nightlife venues that catered to the spring break crowd. Amanda had spent most of the day studying in her room, working through assigned readings for her criminal psychology course while her friends enjoyed the beach. She'd joined them for a late lunch at a beachfront restaurant, but had returned to the hotel by 3 p.m., explaining that she needed to maintain her study schedule despite being on vacation. Her discipline was characteristic. Amanda approached her education with the same systematic thoroughness that characterized everything she did. The evening plan was typical for the group. Dinner at a nearby chain restaurant followed by visits to several bars that featured live music and dancing. Amanda had agreed to join them, though she'd mentioned wanting to return to the hotel by midnight to ensure adequate sleep before resuming studies the following day. Her friends had learned to accept Amanda's structured approach to balancing leisure and responsibility, even if they occasionally teased her about being the responsible one, who prioritized academic obligations over maximum spring break indulgence. Dinner at TGI Fridays stretched from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., the group lingering over appetizers and drinks while discussing their college experiences, future career plans, and the latest campus gossip from Columbus. Amanda was animated during the meal, laughing at her friends' stories and contributing her own observations about their criminology professors and the cases they'd been studying in class. "I'm telling you," Amanda said during a discussion about unsolved crimes, "most cases that stay cold do so because crucial evidence was missed or contaminated during the initial investigation. If investigators followed proper protocols consistently, solve rates would be dramatically higher." Her friend Marcus Johnson, also a criminology major, challenged this assertion. "But what about cases where there literally is no evidence? What about perfect crimes?" "Perfect crimes don't exist," Amanda replied with the confidence of someone who'd studied hundreds of case files. "There's always evidence. The question is whether investigators are skilled enough to recognize it, and whether technology exists to analyze it properly. Cases that seem unsolvable today might be routine once forensic science advances." The conversation was eerily prescient, though none of them could have known that Amanda herself would soon become a case study in exactly the phenomena she was describing. A crime that appeared perfect due to investigator oversight and technological limitations that wouldn't be resolved for over 2 decades. 21 Wow. Last radio interview. At 9 p.m., Amanda made her scheduled daily phone call to her mother, Susan Cole, who was at home in suburban Cleveland waiting anxiously to hear that her daughter was safe and enjoying her spring break trip. These calls had been Amanda's compromise with her parents, who had been hesitant about allowing their daughter to participate in the Florida trip, given the reputation of spring break destinations for excessive drinking and risk-taking behavior. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in like promised." Amanda's voice came through clearly on the call. "How's Florida treating you, honey?" "It's good. Mostly studying today, but I went to the beach for a few hours. We're about to head out to some bars with live music. I'll be back at the hotel by midnight, so don't worry if you don't hear from me tonight." "Are you staying with the group? Not wandering off alone?" "Mom, I'm 22 years old and a criminology major. I think I know how to stay safe. But yes, I'm staying with friends. Jessica and Sarah are in the room next door, and Marcus and the guys are right down the hall. I'm probably the most paranoid person in our group about safety. I know, sweetie, I just worry. It's what mothers do. I'll call you tomorrow morning, same time. Love you." "Love you too, Amanda. Be safe." That conversation, lasting less than 3 minutes, represented Susan Cole's final communication with her daughter. The systematic protocol that Amanda had established, daily 9:00 p.m. calls to provide reassurance about her safety, would become a source of torment when Amanda failed to call the following evening. This failure initiated the investigation that would consume Susan's life for the next 22 years. 21:30, 23:45, lost hours. Amanda and her friends spent the next several hours visiting 3 different bars within walking distance of the Oceanside Resort. Security footage from these establishments, reviewed extensively during the subsequent investigation, showed Amanda appearing relaxed and happy, dancing with her friends, consuming what appeared to be 2 or 3 drinks over the course of the evening. This was moderate consumption, consistent with her typically responsible behavior. Several witnesses would later confirm Amanda's presence at these venues, though none reported seeing her interact with anyone outside her immediate friend group. She wasn't approached by aggressive strangers, didn't appear to exchange contact information with anyone she'd just met, and showed no signs of intoxication or distress that might have made her vulnerable to predation. At 11:30 p.m., Amanda told her friends she was heading back to the hotel, explaining that she was tired and wanted to ensure adequate sleep before resuming studying the following morning. This early departure was characteristic. Amanda had established patterns during the trip of leaving nightlife venues before her friends, prioritizing rest and maintaining the study schedule she'd planned before the trip. Her friends later recalled that Amanda seemed completely normal during her departure, no unusual nervousness, no mentions of feeling uncomfortable or noticing anyone following her. She hugged Jessica and Sarah, waved to the others, and walked out of the bar alone at approximately 11:38 p.m., according to the establishment's security footage. The walk from the bar to the Oceanside Resort covered approximately 4 blocks along Atlantic Avenue, the main beachfront corridor that was heavily populated even at midnight during spring break season. Security cameras from various businesses along this route captured Amanda's progress homeward, walking alone but purposefully, not appearing to notice or be followed by anyone who might have presented a threat. She entered the Oceanside Resort lobby at 11:52 p.m., clearly visible on the hotel's security cameras. She waved to the night desk clerk, Roger Williams, who would later testify that Amanda appeared completely sober and normal. She crossed the lobby to the elevators, pressed the call button, and entered the elevator car when it arrived approximately 15 seconds later. The elevator's security camera, one of only 2 cameras operating in the hotel's elevator system that night due to maintenance issues, showed Amanda alone, checking her phone briefly before the doors closed. She pressed the button for the 8th floor, leaned against the elevator wall, and appeared to be completely relaxed and untroubled. That elevator footage, time-stamped at 11:53 p.m., represented the last confirmed sighting of Amanda Cole. She would never be seen alive again by anyone who knew her name. 0-0-02-47, impossible disappearance. What happened to Amanda Cole between 11:53 p.m. on March 22nd and 10:15 a.m. on March 23rd exists primarily in absence, in the traces she left behind and the impossibilities that those traces created. The 8th floor hallway security camera, which should have captured her walking from the elevator to room 814, was not functioning that night. This wasn't unusual. The hotel's aging security system frequently experienced camera failures that maintenance staff addressed as budget and time permitted. Amanda's room key was used to access room 814 at 11:54 p.m., according to the hotel's electronic lock system. This represented her final recorded interaction with any hotel system. After that timestamp, Amanda Cole effectively ceased to exist in any verifiable way. Forensic analysis conducted in the days following her disappearance revealed fragments of a timeline that made no coherent sense. The shower in room 814 had been used sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., based on the residual moisture and soap residue patterns analyzed by crime scene technicians. Coffee had been brewed in the room's coffee maker, probably between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. based on the temperature of the remaining liquid and the rate of cooling in the room's air-conditioned environment. Most puzzling was the bed, which appeared to have been deliberately made rather than simply unused. The hospital corners and tight sheet arrangement suggested intentional preparation rather than the natural state of a bed that hadn't been disturbed. Crime scene investigators couldn't determine whether Amanda had made the bed herself or whether someone else had arranged it after the fact. The chain lock presented the central mystery that would define the entire investigation. Hotel maintenance staff confirmed that the mechanism could only be engaged from inside the room. There was no external manipulation technique that would allow someone to secure the chain after exiting. Yet room 814's chain lock was definitely engaged when hotel staff first attempted entry, requiring cutting before the door could be fully opened. Detective Sarah Mitchell from the Daytona Beach Police Department's Major Crimes Unit assumed primary investigative responsibility for Amanda's disappearance. She spent the first week obsessing over that chain lock. She interviewed hotel engineers, consulted with lock manufacturers, and even brought in FBI specialists who had experience with impossible crime scenarios. None of them could explain how Amanda could have left room 814 while leaving the chain lock engaged from inside. The windows in room 814 provided no escape route. Like all upper floor rooms, they were designed to open only 4 inches, enough for ventilation, but not enough for a person to squeeze through. The window screens were intact with no signs of tampering or removal. Even if someone had somehow managed to exit through the window, the 8th floor location meant an immediate fatal fall to the ground below, a possibility that was ruled out when no remains were found in the areas beneath the window. The room's air conditioning vents were too small to accommodate a human body. The walls were solid concrete, with no hidden passages or access panels that might have allowed alternative exits. The bathroom's plumbing connections were visible and intact, eliminating any possibility of escape through those systems. Room 814 was, by all physical evidence and architectural analysis, a sealed environment from which no one could have departed while leaving the chain lock engaged from inside. Yet Amanda Cole was indisputably gone, and the evidence suggested she'd been present in the room for several hours, after returning from the bar before vanishing in a manner that violated every principle of physical reality that investigators understood. At 2:47 a.m., the estimated time when Amanda's disappearance likely occurred, based on forensic analysis of various evidence traces, something impossible happened in room 814 of the Oceanside Resort. A young woman vanished from a locked room, leaving behind her phone, wallet, ID, and every personal belonging except the clothes she'd been wearing. She disappeared so completely that not a single witness would ever come forward with credible information about seeing her after she entered that elevator at 11:53 p.m. How does someone disappear from a locked room? For 22 years, that question would haunt investigators, torture Amanda's family, and challenge every assumption about hotel security and spring break safety. The answer, when it finally came during hotel demolition in 2024, would reveal that the impossible wasn't impossible at all. It just required insider knowledge, construction expertise, and the kind of cold patience that only true predators possess. 23 March 2002. First 24 hours. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived at the Oceanside Resort at 11:47 a.m. on March 23rd, approximately 90 minutes after Amanda Cole's disappearance had been reported to police. At 34 years old, Mitchell brought 8 years of investigative experience to what initially appeared to be a routine missing person case involving a college student who had probably wandered off during spring break activities. But the scene in room 814 immediately indicated this was anything but routine. Mitchell's first observation focused on the severed chain lock, which hotel security had cut to gain entry. She photographed it extensively, documenting the mechanism's position and the clean cut that had been necessary to breach the security measure. The chain's engagement from inside the room represented a physical impossibility if Amanda had left voluntarily, unless she'd discovered some technique for manipulating the mechanism from outside that hotel engineers insisted didn't exist. The detective's systematic examination of the room revealed contradictions that defied logical explanation. Evidence of recent occupation, damp towels, warm coffee, shower moisture, suggested Amanda had been present within the past few hours. But the precisely made bed, the neat arrangement of personal belongings, and the complete absence of clothing except what Amanda had been wearing created a picture of deliberate preparation rather than spontaneous departure. Most troubling was what was missing. Amanda's cell phone, wallet, and room key remained in the room. items that no one leaving voluntarily would abandon, especially not a criminology major who understood how vulnerability increased without identification or means of communication. Her suitcase contained all her clothing except the outfit she'd worn the previous evening: jeans, a green tank top, and white sneakers that multiple witnesses had described seeing her wear at the bars. Mitchell interviewed hotel staff systematically, beginning with the people who had first discovered Amanda's absence. Maria Santos, the housekeeper who had screamed upon finding the chain-locked room empty, was still visibly shaken hours later. She'd worked at the Oceanside for 12 years and had never encountered anything remotely similar. The chain lock was engaged, Maria repeated multiple times during her interview, as if saying it enough times might make it make sense. I saw it myself before Mr. Tucker cut it. How does someone leave a room and lock the chain from inside? Security Chief Raymond Tucker provided more technical detail about the chain lock mechanism, explaining that the hotel had installed this particular model specifically because it couldn't be manipulated from outside the room. It's a security feature, he told Mitchell. Guests can lock themselves in and be confident that even someone with a master key can't enter without their knowledge. The chain has to be unlatched from inside. There's no external access to the mechanism at all. Could Amanda have left the room earlier without engaging the chain, and someone else entered later and locked it from inside? Tucker considered this possibility before shaking his head. Her room key was last used at 11:54 p.m. last night. The electronic log shows no subsequent access, and who would enter her room in the middle of the night just to lock the chain? It doesn't make sense. Nothing about the situation made sense, and Mitchell's frustration grew as each new piece of information contradicted logical explanations, rather than supporting them. The hotel's security camera system, which should have provided crucial evidence about Amanda's movements and potential contacts, instead created more questions than answers. The Oceanside Resort's surveillance network was comprehensive on paper, but plagued by maintenance issues and equipment failures that had never been fully addressed by management operating on tight budgets. The lobby cameras had captured Amanda entering the hotel at 11:52 p.m., appearing completely normal and unaccompanied. The elevator camera showed her alone at 11:53 p.m., pressing the 8th floor button and appearing relaxed and unthreatening. But the hallway camera on the 8th floor, the camera that should have shown Amanda walking from the elevator to room 814, had not been functioning that night. Mitchell reviewed footage from every operational camera in the hotel, searching for any indication of Amanda's presence after she exited the elevator. The stairwell cameras, the pool area cameras, the parking lot cameras, all showed no trace of her. It was as if she'd stepped out of the elevator and into a surveillance blind spot from which she never emerged. How long has the 8th floor hallway camera been non-functional? Mitchell asked Tucker during their afternoon interview. It went offline sometime on March 20th. We have a maintenance log entry showing that our security tech identified the problem and ordered a replacement part. The camera was scheduled to be repaired on March 26th after spring break week, when we could take that section offline without impacting guest room access. So there's a 3-day window where the 8th floor had no hallway surveillance? Correct, but that's not unusual during our busy season. We prioritize repairs based on security risk assessment, and hallway cameras are lower priority than entry points in public areas. Mitchell understood the logic but couldn't shake the feeling that this camera failure was too convenient. The one camera that would have documented Amanda's movements during her final known moments had coincidentally been offline, creating a perfect gap in surveillance coverage. The detective requested maintenance records for all hotel security equipment, looking for patterns that might indicate sabotage rather than routine failure. But the records showed only the predictable decay of aging systems operated by a budget-conscious property that deferred maintenance whenever possible. Jessica Martinez and Sarah Thompson, Amanda's roommates in the adjoining room 8 and 12, were interviewed separately on the afternoon of March 23rd, both still in shock at their friend's disappearance. Their accounts of the previous evening matched each other and were consistent with security footage and witness statements from the bars they'd visited. Amanda left around 11:30, Jessica told Mitchell. She said she was tired and wanted to get back to the hotel to sleep. That was totally normal for her. She always left before us because she had this whole study schedule she was trying to maintain even during spring break. Did she seem worried or nervous about anything? Did she mention noticing anyone following her or paying too much attention to her? No, nothing like that. Amanda was actually in a really good mood last night. She'd been stressed about midterms, but she said she was making good progress on her studying and felt confident about the exams. She was laughing and dancing with us at the bar. There was no indication anything was wrong. Sarah provided similar testimony, adding details about Amanda's characteristic caution about personal safety. Amanda was probably the most paranoid person I know about security. She always made sure she had her room key, her phone, her ID. She never walked alone in unfamiliar areas. She checked in with us constantly to make sure everyone knew where everyone else was. The idea that she would just wander off without her phone or wallet is completely inconsistent with who she was. Marcus Johnson, another criminology major who had been close to Amanda since their freshman year, struggled to reconcile her disappearance with everything he knew about her personality and training. We literally just had a conversation about unsolved crimes at dinner last night. Amanda was talking about how most cold cases result from investigator errors or technological limitations, not from perfect crimes that leave no evidence. She was the last person who would make herself vulnerable to the kind of crime that she studied academically. The irony of Amanda's disappearance, that a criminology student who understood criminal behavior and risk assessment had become a victim of exactly the type of crime she'd been studying, wasn't lost on any of the investigators working her case. Amanda's mother, Susan Cole, received the call no parent ever wants to hear at 2:17 p.m. on March 23rd, when Detective Mitchell personally contacted her to report that Amanda was missing under circumstances that suggested possible foul play. Susan's first reaction was denial. Amanda was too careful, too aware, too disciplined to simply disappear. She called me last night at 9 p.m., just like she'd been doing every night since she got to Florida, Susan told Mitchell during their initial phone conversation. She sounded completely normal. She said she was going to bars with her friends but would be back at the hotel by midnight. She promised to call me this morning. When she didn't call, I assumed she'd just slept in. I never imagined. Susan's voice broke, the horrible realization settling in that the daughter who had called faithfully every day was now missing under circumstances that made no sense. Susan and her husband Robert were on a flight to Florida within 3 hours of receiving Mitchell's call. They abandoned their jobs and responsibilities in Cleveland to be present during the search for their daughter. They arrived in Daytona Beach at 10:43 p.m. on March 23rd, driving directly to the Oceanside Resort, where Mitchell had arranged to meet them. The detective's briefing in the hotel conference room, a space usually reserved for small business meetings but now converted into a temporary command post, provided Susan and Robert with details that made Amanda's disappearance even more inexplicable. The locked room, the engaged chain, the abandoned phone and wallet, the complete absence of surveillance footage showing her departure. "I don't understand," Susan kept repeating. "How does someone disappear from a locked room? Where is my daughter?" Mitchell wished she had answers to provide, but 48 hours into the investigation, she had only questions that multiplied faster than potential explanations. The search for Amanda Cole expanded systematically during the week following her disappearance, involving resources from multiple law enforcement agencies and volunteer organizations. Daytona Beach Police coordinated with FBI specialists who had experience with missing persons cases, while local volunteers organized beach sweeps and searches of areas where a disoriented or injured person might have wandered. Search dogs were brought in to track Amanda's scent from room 814, but the trail led only to the elevator and then disappeared. Either Amanda had departed in a vehicle immediately upon leaving the hotel, or the scent trail had been contaminated by the thousands of spring break visitors who had passed through the same spaces during the intervening hours. Dive teams searched waterways near the hotel, operating under the theory that Amanda might have somehow ended up in the ocean, despite the physical impossibility of exiting from her 8th-floor room. The searches revealed nothing except the routine debris and underwater landscape of a beach tourist area. Helicopter surveys of the surrounding area used thermal imaging to search for any heat signatures that might indicate a living person or recently deceased remains. Again, nothing connected to Amanda emerged from hundreds of hours of aerial search operations. Local hospitals, morgues, and police departments throughout Florida were contacted with Amanda's description and photograph. Be on lookout notifications went out to law enforcement agencies across the southeastern United States, operating under multiple theories about what might have happened after her disappearance from the hotel. But as days turned into weeks without any credible sightings or evidence discoveries, the investigation began shifting from active search to cold case analysis. The physical impossibility of Amanda's departure from room 814 remained the central mystery that no amount of investigative resources could explain. Susan Cole's life became defined by Amanda's absence in ways that fundamentally altered her identity and daily existence. She took extended leave from her job as a high school English teacher, eventually resigning entirely when it became clear that she couldn't maintain professional responsibilities while devoting every waking hour to searching for her daughter. The hotel room, room 814 at the Oceanside Resort, became the focus of Susan's obsession. She visited it repeatedly during the first months after Amanda's disappearance, standing in the space where her daughter had last been confirmed present and trying to understand the impossible physics of her departure. Hotel management eventually grew uncomfortable with these visits, gently suggesting that Susan's presence was disturbing other guests and requesting that she limit her access to the property. But Susan couldn't stop. Couldn't accept that her daughter had simply vanished from a locked room without leaving traces that investigators could follow. She hired private investigators, psychics, search and rescue experts, anyone who offered even a slim possibility of finding answers that law enforcement had failed to provide. The annual memorial services began in March 2003, 1 year after Amanda's disappearance. They were held on Daytona Beach near the Oceanside Resort, drawing Amanda's college friends, concerned community members, and families of other missing persons who found solidarity in shared grief and frustration. Susan spoke at each service, her voice growing harder with each passing year as hope transformed into determination and then into bitter acceptance that Amanda was likely dead. "Someone knows what happened to my daughter," Susan said at the 10th anniversary service in 2012. "Someone either hurt her directly or knows who did. And that person has been living free for 10 years while my family has been trapped in an endless nightmare of not knowing. I won't stop asking questions. I won't stop demanding answers. I won't let Amanda be forgotten." The Oceanside Resort closed in 2018, 16 years after Amanda's disappearance. The aging property had never recovered from the negative publicity generated by her case, with parents becoming reluctant to allow their college-age children to stay at a hotel associated with an unsolved disappearance. The building sat vacant for several years, fenced off and gradually deteriorating while ownership changed hands multiple times as developers evaluated various proposals for the valuable beachfront property. The demolition contract was awarded to Coastal Reconstruction Services in November 2023, with work scheduled to begin in January 2024. The plan called for complete demolition of the existing structure, followed by construction of luxury condominiums that would capitalize on the property's prime Atlantic coast location. Construction foreman Maria Santos, coincidentally the nephew of Maria Santos, who had discovered Amanda's empty room 22 years earlier, supervised the demolition crew as they systematically gutted the interior of the former hotel. The work proceeded floor by floor with crews removing fixtures, tearing out walls, and exposing the building's structural elements. On January 15, 2024, demolition workers reached the 8th floor. Miguel's crew was removing bathroom fixtures from what had been room 814 when they made a discovery that would finally answer questions that had haunted Daytona Beach for over 2 decades. Behind the bathroom's back wall, in a space that shouldn't have existed according to the original building plans, Miguel's crew discovered a concealed cavity approximately 3 feet wide, 6 feet tall, and 18 inches deep. The space had been created by constructing a false wall in front of the original bathroom wall, creating a hiding place that was invisible unless the bathroom was completely demolished. Inside that hidden space, wrapped in plastic sheeting that had prevented complete decomposition, were human remains that DNA analysis would later confirm belonged to Amanda Nicole Cole. The discovery triggered an immediate law enforcement response. Detective Lisa Rodriguez from the Daytona Beach Police Department's cold case unit arrived at the demolition site within 40 minutes of Miguel's initial 911 call. Rodriguez, who had reviewed Amanda's case file numerous times during her 10 years with the department, immediately understood the significance of the location. The bathroom in room 814, Rodriguez confirmed with Miguel. "You're certain this was the same room where Amanda Cole disappeared in 2002? "Absolutely certain. We're working systematically, and this is definitely the 8th floor northeast corner. Room 814 according to the old hotel layout." The concealed space had been constructed with professional expertise, using materials and techniques that matched the hotel's original construction. The false wall was built from the same concrete block as the rest of the bathroom, finished with tile that perfectly matched the surrounding surfaces. Unless someone knew to look for it, unless the bathroom was completely demolished, the hidden cavity would remain invisible indefinitely. Crime scene investigators documented every detail of the discovery, photographing the remains and the construction that had concealed them for 22 years. Forensic anthropologist Dr. Patricia Martinez conducted preliminary examination at the scene, noting that the remains showed evidence of blunt force trauma to the skull, injuries consistent with being struck repeatedly with a heavy object. Based on the condition of the remains and the environment they were preserved in, Dr. Martinez explained during the initial briefing, "I'd estimate death occurred very close to the time of disappearance. The plastic wrapping prevented complete decomposition, but there's been significant tissue degradation. However, we should be able to extract DNA for positive identification and possibly recover other forensic evidence that will help us understand exactly what happened." DNA and security camera breakthrough. The DNA confirmation came within 3 days. The remains were definitively identified as Amanda Cole through comparison with genetic samples provided by Susan Cole. After 22 years of uncertainty, Susan finally had the answer to the question that had consumed her adult life. Her daughter was dead, murdered within hours of her disappearance, and concealed in a location that investigators had examined multiple times without discovering. But identification of the victim was only the beginning. The critical question remained: who had killed Amanda, and how had they managed to conceal her body in a hidden space that suggested construction expertise and detailed knowledge of the hotel's layout? Detective Rodriguez initiated a comprehensive review of all evidence from the original 2002 investigation, now viewed through the lens of the construction expertise required to create Amanda's burial place. The false wall hadn't been a temporary hiding spot hastily created in panic. It was a professional job that required tools, materials, and knowledge of hotel construction that most people wouldn't possess. The breakthrough came when Rodriguez began investigating hotel maintenance and construction personnel who had been employed at the Oceanside Resort in March 2002. The original investigation had interviewed some maintenance staff, but the focus had been on whether they'd seen Amanda after her disappearance, not on whether any of them had the skills to construct a concealed space within a hotel room. One name appeared repeatedly in hotel employment records with notations that took on sinister significance when examined 22 years later: James Warren Hutchins. Hutchins had worked as the hotel's night maintenance supervisor from 1998 to 2005. He had been responsible for handling maintenance emergencies that occurred during overnight hours, when regular day shift personnel weren't available. His employment records showed he had master key access to all hotel rooms. His job responsibilities included responding to guest room issues, plumbing problems, electrical failures, lock malfunctions. Most significantly, personnel files indicated he had extensive construction experience prior to joining the Oceanside Resort, including work on hotel renovation projects throughout Florida. Hutchins had been interviewed briefly during the original investigation, confirming only that he'd seen nothing unusual on the night of Amanda's disappearance. Detective Mitchell's notes from that 2002 interview showed that Hutchins had appeared cooperative and concerned, offering to help in any way possible. He'd even volunteered to review hotel security footage, using his knowledge of the system to help identify any gaps or technical issues that might have affected surveillance coverage. That involvement now appeared suspicious rather than helpful. Rodriguez began constructing a timeline of Hutchins' activities on the night of March 22 to 23, 2002, using employment records that documented his presence at the hotel during the overnight shift when Amanda had vanished. The most damning evidence came from hotel work order records. At 3:15 a.m. on March 23rd, approximately 30 minutes after forensic analysis suggested Amanda had been killed, Hutchins had logged a maintenance work order for room 814, claiming he'd responded to a noise complaint from the room below. The work order noted, "Investigated noise, found no issues, situation resolved." That fabricated work order had given Hutchins legitimate access to room 814 during the window when Amanda's body was being concealed. He would have used his master key to enter the room, created the false wall using materials from the hotel's maintenance supply areas, and engaged the chain lock from inside before departing through his concealed access point. The chain lock that had seemed to prove no one could have left the room had actually been Hutchins' final touch, a piece of misdirection designed to make Amanda's disappearance appear impossible. Further investigation into James Hutchins revealed a pattern of predatory behavior that had been hidden behind his professional competence and affable demeanor. Former co-workers interviewed by Rodriguez described Hutchins as someone who paid unusual attention to female guests, particularly young college students during spring break seasons. He always volunteered for night shift maintenance during March, one former co-worker recalled. Said it was because of the overtime pay, but I always thought he just liked being around all the spring break girls when they were drunk and vulnerable. Most disturbingly, Rodriguez discovered that Amanda Cole hadn't been Hutchins' only victim. 2 other young women had disappeared from Daytona Beach area hotels during spring break seasons between 1999 and 2004. Both cases had gone cold due to lack of evidence, but both victims had been staying at properties where Hutchins had worked or performed contract maintenance. Jennifer Walsh, age 21, had disappeared from a hotel in 1999. Her body was never found. Sarah Mitchell, age 23, had vanished in 2004 from a property 3 miles from the Oceanside Resort. Her case also remained unsolved, with her remains never recovered. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit, brought in to profile Hutchins based on the emerging evidence, concluded that he likely represented a serial predator who had used his position and expertise to target vulnerable young women over a period of at least 6 years. The hotel maintenance role had provided perfect cover: master key access, legitimate reasons to be in guest rooms, knowledge of security system blind spots, and construction expertise to conceal evidence. But finding evidence of Hutchins's crimes proved easier than finding Hutchins himself. He had left the Oceanside Resort in 2005, 3 years after Amanda's murder, taking a position at a hotel in Georgia. He'd worked in the hospitality industry across several southern states over the following years, always in maintenance roles that provided the access and anonymity he required. By 2024, James Warren Hutchins was 58 years old and living in Memphis, Tennessee, working as a maintenance contractor for a property management company that serviced multiple hotels. When Rodriguez and FBI agents arrived to arrest him on February 3, 2024, they found a man who had spent 22 years living freely, while 3 families suffered through decades of not knowing what had happened to their daughters. The interrogation of James Hutchins, conducted over 3 days in February 2024, revealed the calculated nature of his crimes and the cold patience that had allowed him to avoid detection for over 2 decades. Hutchins initially denied any involvement in Amanda's death, claiming he barely remembered her despite having logged a maintenance work order for her room on the night she disappeared. But confronted with the physical evidence, the concealed space that matched his construction expertise, the work order that placed him in room 814 during the critical time frame, and forensic evidence linking him to Amanda's remains, Hutchins' denials gradually crumbled. The confession that emerged was chilling in its matter-of-fact recounting of premeditated murder. Hutchins had noticed Amanda during her first days at the hotel, had observed her patterns and routines, and had identified her as a target who fit his preferred victim profile: college age, traveling with friends but sometimes alone, attractive and confident in a way that Hutchins found simultaneously appealing and threatening. She was in the hallway outside her room around 2 a.m., Hutchins told investigators. Said she couldn't sleep and was going to get ice. I told her I was doing maintenance rounds, offered to walk with her to make sure she was safe. She declined politely, said she was fine on her own. That's when I decided. The rejection had triggered rage in Hutchins, who couldn't tolerate women asserting independence or rejecting his offers of help. He'd used his master key to enter room 814 after Amanda returned from getting ice, confronting her with claims that there had been noise complaints and he needed to inspect the room's plumbing. Amanda had been suspicious, had questioned why maintenance would be necessary at 2:30 a.m., had moved toward her phone to call the front desk and verify Hutchins' story. That's when he'd attacked, striking her repeatedly with a pipe wrench he carried as part of his maintenance tools. The murder hadn't been planned in detail, but the concealment had been. Hutchins had constructed the false bathroom wall over the following 3 hours, using materials he'd staged in advance and construction techniques he'd perfected during his years working hotel renovations. The work had been completed by 6 a.m., when the day shift began arriving, and his continued presence in the room would have raised questions. The chain lock had been his final stroke of genius, engaging it from inside before departing through the concealed space, then removing a section of the bathroom wall tile from the adjacent room 816, which was vacant, to exit the hidden cavity. He'd replaced the tile section in room 816 immediately, leaving no trace of his access point. The chain lock made it look impossible, Hutchins explained with disturbing pride. I knew investigators would focus on that, would waste time trying to figure out how she could leave a chained room. While they were chasing that impossible explanation, I was just another maintenance worker doing his job. Asked about Jennifer Walsh and Sarah Mitchell, the other missing women whose disappearances paralleled Amanda's, Hutchins initially refused to comment. But forensic teams were already searching hotel properties where he'd worked during those time periods, looking for concealed spaces that might contain additional remains. Detective Lisa Rodriguez drove to Susan Cole's home in Cleveland on February 5, 2024, to deliver news that Susan had been waiting 22 years to hear. Susan was now 67 years old, her hair completely gray, her face lined with decades of grief and frustration. She answered the door already knowing something significant had happened. Rodriguez wouldn't have traveled from Florida for routine updates. We found him, Mrs. Cole. We found the man who killed Amanda. And we found Amanda. She's been hidden in the hotel all these years, concealed behind a false wall that the killer constructed to hide her body. Susan's reaction wasn't the relief that Rodriguez had anticipated. It was a complex mixture of vindication, rage, and renewed grief as 22 years of hoping for the best collapsed into confirmed worst-case scenario. Her daughter hadn't run away, hadn't been kidnapped and held somewhere, hadn't suffered amnesia and started a new life. Amanda had been murdered within hours of her disappearance and left in a tomb within the hotel, where Susan had begged investigators to search more thoroughly. I knew she was still there, Susan said, her voice hollow. I knew she couldn't have left that room. Everyone told me I was being irrational, that I needed to accept that she'd somehow left the hotel. But I knew. A mother knows. The trial of James Warren Hutchins began in September 2024, 7 months after his arrest. He was charged with first-degree murder in Amanda's death, along with federal charges related to Jennifer Walsh and Sarah Mitchell's disappearances, pending ongoing investigations. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: forensic analysis of Amanda's remains, Hutchins' construction expertise and opportunity, his history of predatory behavior, and most damning, his detailed confession describing exactly how he'd killed Amanda and concealed her body. Hutchins' defense attorney attempted to argue that the confession had been coerced, that the physical evidence was circumstantial, that 22 years between crime and arrest violated his right to speedy trial. But the jury deliberated only 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. On December 15, 2024, James Warren Hutchins was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. He was 58 years old and would spend the remainder of his life in a Florida maximum security facility, finally held accountable for crimes he'd committed 22 years earlier. The final memorial service for Amanda Cole was held on March 23, 2025, exactly 23 years after her disappearance. But this service was different from the 22 that had preceded it. This was a burial service, an opportunity to finally lay Amanda to rest with the dignity and ceremony that had been denied her for over 2 decades. Susan stood before the assembled mourners at the cemetery in Cleveland, speaking words she'd never imagined she would say. Today we finally bury my daughter. For 22 years, Amanda was trapped in the place where she died, hidden behind a wall that her killer built to conceal his crime. But she's free now. She can finally rest. James Hutchins spent 22 years living free while my family lived in hell. He went to work, had relationships, traveled, enjoyed life while we suffered through not knowing what had happened to Amanda. That injustice can never be fully addressed. But he's in prison now, and he'll die there. And that's the closest thing to justice that we're going to get. This case was solved not through brilliant detective work, though Detective Rodriguez deserves enormous credit for her persistence. It was solved because the building where Amanda died was finally torn down, exposing the hiding place that had concealed her for 22 years. If that hotel hadn't been demolished, if luxury condos hadn't been planned for that location, Amanda might never have been found. Her case might have remained unsolved forever. Susan announced the establishment of the Amanda Cole Foundation, dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and advocating for improved hotel security measures that might prevent similar crimes. The foundation would focus particularly on ensuring that missing person investigations thoroughly examined physical structures for concealed spaces, a protocol that hadn't existed in 2002, but that Amanda's case had proven necessary. My daughter studied criminology because she wanted to understand how crimes occur and how they can be solved, Susan concluded. She never imagined she would become a case study in exactly the kind of crime she was learning to investigate. But her death has taught us lessons about hotel security, about the importance of preserving physical evidence even when cases seem unsolvable, and about the need to never give up searching for answers no matter how much time passes. Amanda Cole's case prompted comprehensive reviews of hotel security protocols throughout the hospitality industry. The revelation that a maintenance worker had used his position and expertise to commit murder and conceal evidence for 22 years exposed vulnerabilities that had never been adequately addressed. New industry standards were implemented requiring enhanced background screening. All hotel employees with master key access now undergo comprehensive background checks, including criminal history in all states where they've lived or worked, not just their current location. Surveillance system. Redundancy. Hotels must maintain backup systems ensuring that camera failures are immediately detected and repaired, with no gaps in coverage lasting more than 24 hours. Structural documentation. Detailed building plans must be maintained and made available to law enforcement during missing person investigations, allowing investigators to identify potential concealed spaces. Access logging. Electronic systems must track not just room access, but also which employee credentials were used, creating accountability for every entry into guest rooms. Regular security audits. Independent third parties conduct annual audits examining both technical security measures and employee behavior patterns that might indicate predatory conduct. These changes came too late to save Amanda Cole, Jennifer Walsh, Sarah Mitchell, and potentially other victims whose cases remain unsolved. But they represented systematic improvements designed to prevent hotel maintenance workers or other employees from exploiting their positions to target vulnerable guests. The Oceanside Resort site, where Amanda had died and been concealed for 22 years, was completed as planned. A luxury condominium building with ocean views and state-of-the-art security systems. But the developers included a memorial garden on the property, dedicated to Amanda and other victims of crimes that took advantage of security gaps and concealment opportunities that proper protocols might have prevented. Even with James Hutchins convicted and imprisoned, questions about Amanda's final hours remained partially unanswered. Hutchins' confession provided the broad outline of what had happened, but details that might have brought Susan additional closure died with his refusal to elaborate on certain aspects of the crime. Where exactly had he first encountered Amanda that night? Had she recognized the danger she was in before he attacked? How long had she suffered? These questions would haunt Susan for the remainder of her life, representing the incomplete nature of justice even when perpetrators are identified and punished. The ongoing investigations into Jennifer Walsh and Sarah Mitchell's disappearances continued, with FBI teams searching hotels where Hutchins had worked during time periods that matched their vanishings. But as of March 2025, neither woman's remains had been recovered. suggesting that Hutchins had refined his concealment techniques over time or had disposed of bodies through methods that didn't leave traces investigators could follow. For the families of those women, Amanda's case represented both hope and renewed anguish. Hope that advanced investigative techniques and persistent detective work might finally provide answers, and anguish knowing that even if their daughters were found, 22-plus years of suffering could have been prevented if earlier investigations had been more thorough. The demolition crew that discovered Amanda's remains continued their work after forensic teams completed their evidence collection, systematically tearing down the remaining structure until nothing remained of the Oceanside Resort except memories and cautionary tales about the importance of proper security protocols. Maria Santos, whose discovery had finally brought closure to a 22-year-old mystery, found himself unable to forget what he'd seen behind that bathroom wall. He attended Amanda's burial service, standing at the back and saying nothing but feeling the weight of having been the person whose work had finally freed her from the tomb where she'd been sealed.
"I keep thinking about all the times I stayed at hotels," Miguel told Rodriguez during a follow-up interview months after the discovery. "How I never questioned whether the walls were really walls, whether the bathroom might have hidden spaces, whether the maintenance workers were really just doing their jobs. Amanda's case changed how I see buildings. Everything feels like it might be hiding something now."
That pervasive distrust represented one of Hutchins' lasting impacts, the erosion of the basic assumption that hotels are safe spaces where guests can sleep without fear of the people who have keys to their rooms. Amanda had been cautious, had understood risks, had studied criminology specifically to learn how to protect herself, but she'd never imagined that the greatest threat would come from someone in a maintenance uniform, claiming to respond to a noise complaint. The question that haunted Susan Cole for 22 years, how does someone disappear from a locked room, had finally been answered. But the answer revealed that the impossibility had been an illusion, carefully constructed by someone who understood that investigators would waste time chasing impossible explanations, while the simple truth waited behind a false wall for someone to tear it down. Amanda Cole's coffee in room 814 had long since been disposed of. The sheets had been laundered and reused countless times. The bathroom where she'd showered for the final time had been demolished and carted away as rubble. But the lessons learned from her case, about the importance of thorough investigation, about the need for proper security protocols, about the patience required to pursue justice, even when decades pass without resolution, would endure. Some mysteries are solved not through brilliant deduction, but through patient persistence and the eventual exposure of hiding places that were designed to conceal truth forever. Amanda's case proved that forensic evidence can wait decades for discovery, that justice delayed is better than justice denied, and that walls built to hide crimes eventually crumble, revealing the secrets they were constructed to protect. The locked room that had seemed impossible to escape hadn't been locked at all. It had been a cage built by a predator who knew exactly how to make murder look like mystery, how to transform a crime scene into an architectural puzzle that would confuse investigators for 22 years. Until the walls came down, until the truth emerged, until Amanda Cole could finally go home.